Okay. Okay. So live with fingers crossed.
I'm good, how are you? Yes.
Actually, we are starting from ¿Cómo te va? ¿Colombiano? Ahí van a comprar la de ustedes. Sí, Sara, everything posible que me gusta. Sí, yo miro tu tarjeta que está así, no, pero parece que yo soy exacto. Le ayudamos la mano con el equipo que lo de San Andrés. O sea, en la gestión. Entonces estaba hablando con ellos. Esa póliza vale. ¿Cuándo va a salir? Yo me reúno con todos los en la noche donde quieran, yo voy hasta allá, pero reunamos. A ver, ¿qué claro, yo llevo para poner porque la política estas niñas pues quedar con él. Es por el tema más que sí, de que a uno en este negocio de conservación le digan cómo ayudamos, no es fácil. Todas ayudas bienvenidas. Yo no soy yo sé que el negocio es negocio, pero de verdad, todo gracias a Marco.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Lovely to have you with us, and it's great that you'll be able to join us here, either in the Pavilion or Coral, or indeed online as well. So great to have you with us online. So I'm Chip Cunliffe. I'm the Innovation and Pipeline Development Director at AURA, Asian Risk.
Of course, one of these includes the Mesoamerican Reef, where nearly 3 billion people are supported by the coral reefs of that region shared by 4 countries. However, as you know, these ecosystems are at risk through several threats that can include coastal development, lack of wastewater treatment, overfishing, and of course climate threats such as bleaching, which has been very, very bad in the last 2 years, but also hurricanes, more frequent and more intense storms. So for this reason, Marfront, in collaboration with wonderful partners such as KfW, Willis Towers Watson, Its Resilience Solutions Fund, the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance, ECRI, UNDP, AXA, we have been working in implementing a marine insurance program to establish a financial solution that can help us then recover or enhance these environmental services that are lost during a period of a climate threat. And we have also established wonderful working partnerships in the Western Caribbean to replicate and to scale and to explore other types of weather perils to try to determine if parametric insurance is a possible solution. And today you'll hear from our panelists these studies, the activities that have been carried out, those that are already being implemented, those that are being evaluated, and just, in what cases they are good solution, in which cases they may not be, but what can we learn, from doing those evaluations. So before handing it over to Chip, we'll see a video with a summary of some of the activities that have been carried out.
With its stunning scenery and natural richness, the Greater Caribbean is one of the most prestigious tourist destinations in the world.
Coral reefs provide on their own nearly $6.2 billion in ecosystem benefits to countries and the Caribbean region.
In the Caribbean, from dive tourism, for example, countries have reported as much as $2.1 billion. Coral reefs are in essence a natural defense. The higher areas of a coral reef can reduce wave energy by as much as 86%.
A strong coral reef and a healthy coral reef is an important aspect to protecting the coastal areas of our island in the Caribbean from storm surge and the effects of a hurricane and other rain events.
In the Greater Caribbean, so the eastern and the northern Caribbean islands, there are not systematic recovery efforts. We want to build those out, and to build those out, we need to have investment in training and development of protocols, but we also need to have some expectation that the financing is going to be there to pay for those actions to take place.
In the Greater Caribbean region, starting with the countries of Jamaica, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we would start to investigate the possibility of parametric reef insurance concept for storm recovery. This goes well with the CEVP mission, which is to ensure continuous funding for conservation and sustainable development in the Caribbean region. The idea behind it comes from our sister fund, the Mark Fund, and the work that they did in the Mesoamerican Reef area.
The Mesoamerican Reef Insurance Program lies within our Reef Rescue Initiative. Its main objective is to provide financial instruments, tools, and the governance framework to address risk and emergency response for coral reefs. Strategic alliances are important to scale and implement this program in other regions.
Insurance for coral reefs is a way in which we can help to bring financing to undertake rapid recovery actions after a coral reef is impacted by a hurricane. And if we can get the debris cleaned off of the reef very quickly, and if we can reattach corals that might have been broken but are still viable, then the overall recovery of the coral reef is both quicker and it's much more likely to fully recover. And parametric insurance is the ideal tool to trigger that rapid funding that's needed for that rapid response.
Given the enormous amount of resources that it takes to undertake what we call restoration activity, we see the coral reef insurance program as a very welcomed opportunity to ensure that we are able to maintain the gains and the progress that we have made, ensuring that there is a mechanism that supports recovery after some event.
Everything we can do to help the recovery take place and for that recovery to be quicker is really good investment in resources.
These innovative initiatives seek to protect and conserve the natural wonders of the Great Caribbean and the communities whose lives and livelihoods depend on them.
Well, I think it was a great start to our session, providing a little bit of an understanding, I think, of the nature of, I suppose, insurance as it plays out in this region. I think it's quite amazing, actually, that it's only been 6 years since the first reef insurance policy was developed on the Mesoamerican Reef, and actually I think we're up to 7 different locations now. Is it 11? Oh my goodness, okay, I'm really out of touch. 11 different locations along the Mesoamerican Reef, and of course there are different areas of the world where we're also providing some financing, and we're seeing reef insurance being developed in Indonesia and in the Pacific region. So it's really sort of moving forward fairly rapidly, obviously, which is great. And I think that what we're very aware of is that coral reefs evidently provide that value, but how often that's accounted for is probably a fairly large question that needs to be answered and indeed integrated into the bottom line. And through some work that we've been doing with the Coastal Risk Index, which we're going to more formally roll out on Monday, we know that at least around the world, $363 billion of assets are at risk of flooding. No, please come in. Bonjour. Are at risk of flooding around the world, and indeed here in Colombia itself, $2.4 billion worth of assets are at risk of flooding, but coral reefs and mangroves provide $1.2 billion worth of risk reduction value. So that kind of information is the kind of information that hopefully insurers, but also governments and policymakers can utilise to better understand the nature or the value of nature, and indeed more specifically in coral reefs itself. But I think that there is an evident shift in the way in which we need to integrate insurance into our decision making, and that will help to drive further finance into the space. So I don't want to talk too much more. I think the talking, certainly from my side, is done. But I'd love to be able to introduce you to our fantastic all-female panel. And I think this really shows the leadership, not only in terms of the work that we're doing here, but also in this region as well. So, Juanita, there we go. Do you want to come up, or you could? I think it would be great to come up here, and then because I'm going to ask everybody to basically do a 3 to 5 minute presentation, and then we're going to go into a panel session. I'll also ask some questions, and if we have time at the end, I'll bring it to the audience as well. So, Juanita, so I'm going to, in fact, let me just introduce everybody first. Juanita Blanco, so Alternative Risk Transfer for Latin American Caribbean at WTW. WCW been doing a lot of work. Indeed, Constance now works with me, was with WCW and was doing quite a lot of work on the development of the coral reef insurance product itself. Claudia Ruiz from the Reef Rescue Initiative, and where are you, Claudia? There we go, for the MAR Fund. Karen McDonald-Gale, the CEO of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. Natalia Arango from Nexion, there we are, Natalia, she's the Executive Director. Monica Gamboa, Conservation Manager for Forever Costa Rica, where are you, Monica? There we go, hello. And Graciela Reyes.
Research. Not investigation.
We'll say again.
Research and development. I'm not from CIA.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah. Well, there we go.
Who knows?
It's good. It's great. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'm going to ask each of the panelists to come up here and do 2 minutes or 2 to 5 minutes or so of presentation around some of the work that they're undertaking, really to provide you a bit of a flavour of, I think, the innovative nature and where we're moving towards with regard to parametric and coral reef insurance. I know there are some slides here a little bit that go into a bit more detail around parametric insurance. I'm very happy to pick up on some of those elements over the course of the morning. Okay, so Juanita.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Juanita Blanco from WTW. I'm going to give you a quick glance on how parametric insurance work to protect and support the ecosystems. So, for a little bit of context, when we all think about insurance, we tend to think about traditional indemnity insurance, right? For instance, we can think about our houses. When a big peril happens, then after that there comes a loss adjustment process, can take sometimes some time. And after the loss adjustment process, then if you have a qualifying event and a property damage, then the insurance company can reimburse or repay whatever has been damaged, right? But when we think about ecosystems, we do not have loss adjustment protocols for them. In this case, for coral reefs. So that's where we found a gap on the traditional indemnity insurance. And that gap can be filled out by a parametric solution. So basically, how those parametric solutions work. These are index-based policies that has a threshold. When the index triggers and the threshold is met or exceed, that comes a payout from the policy. Basically, parametric solutions have different characteristics and benefits than the traditional insurance. Two of the most important ones is on the parametric solutions, we do not have a loss adjustment process. So we just, the policy triggering, we can receive the funds from the policy. And the second one is the unconstrained use of funds. So basically here, insurer can use the funds as they need. And what this has been doing is just opening a wide range of options on how we can build these parametric policies to protect the ecosystems, right? So basically they have been turning insurable assets into insurable ones. So in here we can think about 3 ways in which parametric solutions supports the ecosystem. The first one is that they aim to support the blue ecosystems that underpin the blue economy. So with these programs now we're able to insure coral reefs, mangroves, seagrass. And the second one is that they aim to support businesses and livelihood from all who depend on the ecosystem. So now we can think about building programs, for example, for the fishermen, to compensate them in order not to fish while we let the ecosystem grow back again after hurricane pass. And the third one is they can help to de-risk investments into the blue economy. So now we have seen programs where we have been able to issue blue bonds supported by a parametric policy. There are 4 things that we need to consider when we think about parametric insurance supporting these conservation initiatives. So the first one is it's really important to have an ongoing effort in wherever we're trying to structure the policy, right? Basically what we're trying to do here is just engaging conservation and resilience building, and what the parametric solution is gonna do is after the peril happens with the funds, they're gonna protect all the investment that we have already been done. The second one is that we really need to have real exposure to the risk. So basically the insurer is going to pay an important amount of premium, so it's important to have exposure to the risk, like the hurricane risk in this case. The third one is important to have a compelling payout case that fits the local purpose and add value. So in the case of the coral reefs, we had scientific information that support that reattaching the corals within 30 to 60 days will still keep them alive. So it makes completely sense for the parametric policy to work. And the last one is have the right institutional infrastructure in place. So it's really important to have a local partner who can quickly receive the funds from the parametric policy and quickly deploy them however they need to be transferred. And they can give us a guidance on how to use that funds to better respond to whatever the damages or have been caused by the natural catastrophe. So this is just a quick summary on how parametric solutions are opening all these wide range of options, helping to create the resilience that we need for the ecosystems. So, thank you.
Gracias. Thank you. Fabulous. So Claudia, I think you're up next.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to speak to you a little bit about the Marine Insurance Program, which is a program that is implemented in the Mesoamerican Reef region. It is a very important tool for reef response and preparedness. The program, the main objective of the program is to implement a cost-effective insurance instrument that can address the risk of hurricanes to the coral reefs. And this insurance is going to provide or provides the immediate funding that is needed to repair the reef when the reefs are impacted by hurricanes. In the program, MARFON is the policyholder. But before going to that, it is important also to mention that the program, through this program, we have established reef response capacities. We have the insurance instrument and the reef response capacities. That are the ones, that are the groups that are going to implement a payout, to oversee and mobilize the response in order to provide the attention to the reef, the immediate attention to the reef. So, as I was saying, in the program, MARFund, the Mesoamerican Reef Fund, the organization Maria Jose and I and Amy work for, we are the policy holder. We are a regional environmental fund, we are a policy holder, and when there is a payout, we receive the funds and we deliver the funds to the response groups through the response committee. There is a response coordinating committee in every site. So, and then they receive the payout and mobilize the response. The program is implemented in the 4 countries of the Mesoamerican Reef region. We started in 2021 when we placed the first coverage with 4 sites included, 2 in Mexico, southern Mexico, and 2 in Belize. And then the next year, we placed 3 more sites for 7 sites, then the next year, 9 sites, and now we have 11 sites covered. So we are now in the 4th year of coverage. And we have also created capacities. As I was saying, we have trained 160 responders. We have 7 committees, 1 per site. And we also have, had the first, this is an integrated policy. An integrated policy that includes all the sites in all only one coverage, right? And so in 2022, in November, there was, the mechanism was tested. The Hurricane Lisa triggered a payout for Turnip Atoll. It delivered $175,000. And of course, because we have been working with the committee and with the response capacities and with the governments, and in this case, the Fisheries Department, we have developed assisted the Turnip Atoll and the response committee for that site to develop a coral response capacity. A plan, a coral reef post-storm response plan that describes and delineates all the activities that need to be taken, implemented before, during, and after the hurricane. So basically, we deliver the funds immediately, 48 hours after we receive the funding, and then they mobilize the response immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Okay, so Karen.
Thank you, Jim. So, good morning again. Karen McDonald-Gill with the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. And really, for those who were there for the video at the beginning, a lot of, and very good that Claudia presented ahead of me, because what we've done is, based on what we've heard and learned from the MARFON region, we have really just begun to test what's possible in the Caribbean region. And I guess there are a couple of steps that go there that make it slightly different from how the MAR Fund is operating in the Mesoamerican Reef region. Caribbean region, of course, has small island developing states, and the idea of how we would work with small islands, and some smaller, some not so small. MAR Fund works site by site. And then the small islands, of course, in a lot of cases, it would be the same reef response team across the whole island. So slight differences in what we thought was possible and how we would operate those funds. So we did do a pilot study under the project that was introduced, and there are some positive findings and directions for us to think about in how we operate. As a regional environmental fund, the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund has partner national level conservation funds that we work with across the Caribbean region in the islands. And the idea of working through those national conservation trust funds for the more immediate payouts is definitely one of the mechanisms that we think makes sense for going forward for the payouts. So it would be a very similar system in terms of CBF holding the insurance and the payouts going through our national conservation trust funds that we already have agreements with, and to the islands on a hopefully quicker and more immediate scale. So we have done some work. Our pilot studies were done in Jamaica, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and we actually have now gone ahead and put together a couple of proposals that now include the Dominican Republic to really try and figure out if this would work and what it would mean. So solely so far for the hurricane scenario, but of course, as we're learning and watching, we do think that there are other coral reef scenarios that may also be worth investigating, but we want to make sure and just get the groundwork started and see what's possible. So we're very excited by the opportunities and very welcome to hear ideas, especially with this scenario and the differences that we have as small islands. Thank you.
So I'm glad I'm the third or fourth person to speak, because mine is going to be really short, but it's for a very good reason, because this is one of the examples where the conservation trust funds collaborate, and we've learned so much from our fund, and they were generous to bring us in. I believe it was in, and this is a bit of a story because I don't have much to say other than what you know. We were in a red light meeting. We have them every year, and I heard Maria Jose talking about this, and I approached her. We hadn't worked together before, and I said, "This just looks very interesting. Can we learn from you?" And now we're here, and we're learning. We don't have to go through the learning curve. It's a great network to be part of. So now, San Andrés, Providencia, and Santa Catarina archipelago is our archipelago in the Caribbean. As you can see here, it's closer to Nicaragua, but that's a different story. And it's one very densely populated island, and then a more pristine and better protected island where we have more natural ecosystems. But in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, it was hit by iota, and it was very hard hit. It probably affected over 70% of the coral formations among those surveyed in massive corals. It destroyed all mangroves and basically killed 90% of the dry forest. And as you very well know, these are all connected systems, so we cannot think only about coral reefs, but in small island circumstances, you need to connect with what's happening inland as well, or terrestrial ecosystems. So that's where we are. And I was hoping you would go through the table, so I'm going to skip it. But we're based on the same logic, where you have different zones of activity. You're all very well versed in these topics. We have only 2 sites. That makes it easier, of course, and it allowed us to do something that probably in a more complex setting wouldn't have been possible, and that is ask the people if they're interested in an insurance. And we were scared because we thought the answer was going to be yes for us. But we went in, would you like us to talk about a coral reef insurance? And they said yes, unanimously, despite the fact that they had been hit by this hurricane 2 years before. And the reason for that is that they very much feel the effects of the destruction of the ecosystems. They were more than happy to endorse and support our intention of being part of this team and work with all you to have the insurance policy. So I think we've gone through the basics. The model is based on wind speeds. There's a response protocol, a payout strategy. We started already, and we have worked with teachers from the region to prepare the response brigades, and now there are formal response brigades that have the tools to come into action as soon as possible. And we're thinking about, of course, financial issues around keeping the coral reef in operation. How are we going to pay on a yearly basis for this insurance policy, because Fondo Acción is going to be the one to have the policy. But we're also thinking about building an emergency fund, learning from what MARFund has also done. And we're trying to get the private sector more engaged. Maybe some of you heard that yesterday we signed a memorandum of understanding with Avianca, which is a very large airline, originally from Colombia. And of course, they first want us to work with them in blue carbon, the usual solid waste management. But they're really, we feel they're really committed from the heart. And what we're doing is slowly but surely showing them that if we don't have coral reefs or mangroves, they won't have passengers in their airplanes. So I think we're on a good way to have them be part of this. I don't know how. It's too early to say. But that's what I can tell you about our strategies to get the money for paying for this in the long term. Maybe even get the local governments to be the ones who are responsible for the payments. Thank you.
Just a couple of words. So Constance and I were lucky enough to visit San Andreas and Providencia at the beginning of this week and see the impact that the iota and indeed the hurricane that happened 2 weeks before that had on the islands, and it was quite an eye-opener, and it really sort of starts to put into perspective the impacts, of course, that the local people have, and I think that a key part of all of this, of course, is to ensure that the local people are integrated into the responses, but also integrated into the learning from the work that's been undertaken. So that for us was a sort of really key output. And I think just in terms of the sustainable financing, how do you sustainably finance a coral reef insurance product in the long term? And of course, yes, there are ways in which the grant funding from different places may be possible, but in terms of that long-term nature is absolutely critical to answer. Okay, so Monica.
Good morning, everyone. Forever Costa Rica, it's another conservation trust fund and part of FETLAC, which is an amazing network. And in this case, MARFund invited us and gave us the opportunity to start looking for some other parameters to try to develop this kind of solution. So in our case, we focus this feasibility study in the Cahuita National Park, which is in the South Caribbean of Costa Rica, and is where the reefs are in a better conservation state at this point. So one of the parameter that we were trying to to do this feasibility was the heat waves, which is something that is happening around, all over the world, but especially in the Caribbean. And one of the main barriers was that we really didn't have enough local information to develop the whole case. But also the conditions in this place in Cahuita are very different from the rest of the Caribbean. So we faced a couple of these barriers, but at the beginning, what we were looking was for more general and regional information, especially from satellite, but it's pretty general at this point. So with Constance, we were looking for other sources of information and data. And at the end, we just find one local oceanic buoy that was giving us some local and real information in the real time. So after many consultations with researchers and with academia, finally we established some basic conditions, but at the end, and specifically for Cahuita, it wasn't possible to develop the whole case. But we really think it's very valuable to keep looking for some other places around the Caribbean in this case. And at least we now know that it is crucial to have enough information, local information, that give us the real conditions of that place to finally develop a solution like this one. With the heat waves, there's a couple things that is very important to mention. It depends also on the frequency of the heat waves that comes to a specific reef, and some of them stays for short term, but some others stays for longer. And in cases, it goes just to bleaching for a while. But in some others, and depends of the time that it stays in the reef, it can go to total immortality. So there's, at this point, it's very valuable to have these kind of studies, just because we are testing and we are looking for other options or other parameters that are affecting the coral reefs. So not because in Costa Rica or in this place the feasibility was negative, that doesn't mean this is something that we need to keep looking for other pilots or other sites where we can do something about those heat waves that are coming more often and increasing with the climate change.
Thank you. Well, it's only one slide. Thanks. Thank you. It's gonna be fast in our case because we're just doing the pre-feasibility study right now. Something that we discussed with Maria Jose is that it will be interesting to have a different system. So I'm gonna talk about the mangrove case in Mexico. I'm gonna give you a little bit of background of what's happening in the Yucatan Peninsula and what was happening 2 years ago when we started thinking about this. We started thinking a project in the Yucatan Peninsula, in the coastal areas of the 3 states. And we were thinking about the project with the Green Climate Fund funding that really focused in all the different threats, environmental threats, human threats, but mostly because it's with GCF climatic threats related to mitigation and adaptations in the coastal areas in the Yucatan Peninsula. And when we started studying, we noticed that it's an area with a lot of mangroves. Over 700,000 hectares have mangroves, but near 20% of them are completely degraded. And the rate of degradation is growing and growing and growing. But we also noticed that 70% of those areas were protected areas, so it seemed that there was some hope of some conservation of those areas. And at the same time, we saw that it was starting to be a region with a lot of brokers and with a lot of private sector institutions that were going to the communities to set voluntary carbon market projects, blue carbon projects. So all of this was happening at the same time. And we were doing the justification to the Green Climate Fund of why a climate project was required there. We saw that every time there were more hurricanes, and the hurricanes were harder and harder hitting these coasts. And we also noticed that there were many different anthropogenic threats to these areas. So we start thinking, okay, maybe it's a little bit contradictory that we are trying to make the case to the Green Climate Fund to invest more there, but at the same time, there is more risk there that it's gonna be destroyed. So how do you invest more in reforestation of mangroves and conservation of mangroves? It's almost for sure that they are gonna disappear soon because of the climatic threats. So we start thinking about a way to de-risk the investments, our investments, the investments of the Green Climate Fund, and also private investments that started to happen around there. And at the same time, Marathon was starting this amazing coral reef insurance that was starting to be very successful in the region. So we thought, okay, this may be interesting. Maria Jose was very, an old Marathon team was very generous to start talking about how we could apply something similar. And so the first thing that we did with that, it's a very depth study to understand the climatic threats of these areas. And then we conducted with universities, with local universities, a very detailed study to see what was the state of the mangroves. After that, the government of Mexico reviewed that study, provided feedback that helped us to have a lot of engagement and appropriation of the government about this data. And finally, WTW created a damage model that helped us to think if it was feasible to continue thinking about a product like this. So as you can see, the mangrove damage model, it was seen that the most interesting it was to focus on the hazard, vulnerability and exposure, and in our case in specific, was focused on the loss of carbon, because we saw that the threat of related to the potential of mitigation was something that we were interested, both from the public point of view, because all these protected areas that I mentioned, but also for these carbon projects from the voluntary market that were starting to happen there. So it was a way to de-risk public investments and also the private investments. So the model included, for example, how the damage model included, for example, the highest peaks in wind speed of the hurricanes, and also the extent of the mangroves, the canopy of the mangroves, and finally the loss of biomass caused by this. So that gave us like a proxy on how much the mitigation potential will be lost. So I'm gonna keep you with this because this is kind of by the book in our desk what we were thinking, and then in the questions I'm gonna tell you what happened in real life when we faced the starting of the implementation of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we had a really interesting few presentations. We'll keep that further over there. This morning. So I'm going to ask everybody, for all of those presenters, to pop up onto the chairs in the front, and then we're going to go through a little panel session. And as I said, we may come to the audience as well, allow you to ask the questions too. So, we got chairs. All fine. Great. So, Juanita, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. So I know that we know that hurricanes, storm intensities are increasing, and surprisingly, it seems oceans are warming to that extent. How do you figure climate change affecting the way parametric insurance costs and works, given what we're seeing in across coral reefs? And thank you.
Thanks, Chip. So basically, when we think parametric insurance and pricing, the way in which the pricing begins is just studying the historicals of the insured location, right? So we study the frequency and the severity of events of the zone that we're actually trying to ensure. So when you think about climate change, the effects on climate change take decades to happen. But of course, they will increase the frequency and the severity of the events. So when we think about pricing, we can definitely see the price of the parametric policy being affected by climate change. So as it takes decades, we're gonna see increases if it continues like it goes. In the medium and long term, definitely the prices of the parametric policies are gonna be affected and are gonna increase. But however, it's important to bear in mind that sometimes year to year, the frequency and the severity of the events not always is just because of climate change, it's just due to seasonality, right? But in the medium long term, yes, in a nutshell, the pricing is going to be affected by the risk of climate change.
Thank you. And in terms of the lessons that you've learned in creating these parametric products, what are the most important ones that you think you have learned over the course of the last, let's say, 5 years? Given that that there's been at least one payout, or maybe two payouts actually, for coral reef insurance in the Louisiana Coral Reef. What do you think you've learned over the course of that time?
So I would say there are basically 3 lessons that we've learned. In the first one is creating the program structures. So we saw that for these hurricane program structures, it's better to use it with gridded data. So basically, when we place grills in this zone, we're trying to ensure it's easily just to determine the threshold and the wind speed in a specific point of the map to understand the wind speed that is going to affect the corals. The second one is ensuring to have the local partner in place. So as we said, it's important to have local partner that is going to be able to receive the payouts of the parametric policy and quickly deploy them, and also give us a guidance on how to use the funds of the parametric policy to quickly respond to the event. And the third one, and I think this is something that everybody has mentioned, is basically the sustainability of the program, right? So try to build resilience is not going to happen from one year to another. We have to make sure that we have these programs ongoing for 5, 10 years in the long term. So we have to make sure we have the correct partner that will help us to fund the premium funding of the program for the long term to keep the resilience building.
Thank you, Anita. So, Claudia, I'm going to come to you. I think in some ways actually the same question. What have you learned since the Hurricane Lisa payout in 2022? How have the replication of the program been affected by that hurricane and that payout? Has it changed?
Well, the program, it is being improved in the sense that, for example, when Hurricane Lisa, what we learned from Hurricane Lisa is that definitely we need to be prepared, right? As I mentioned in the beginning, this is a tool for preparedness. So the committees of the governance that we have created in the 4 countries of the MAR and for each site, they do not have to wait. Our recommendations for them is that they do not have to wait until there is an event coming or a potential event coming. Just let us be prepared. For example, this year, after that event, during all this time, we have retrained the committees and keep providing training for their capacity, for them to be prepared in terms of the response plans updated and all the formats that they have to fill out, because there is administrative procedures, right, that they need to complete when there is a payout, that we receive the payout in order to forward the funds. So basically all this paperwork needs to be developed in advance. And at the very moment of providing the funding, probably a little bit, few things need to be completed, but not all this burden of work, right? Also, another thing that there is not a burden, I mean, because the format and the procedures are simplified, but still, the priority during an event is the safety of the people. So at that moment, the people, they are thinking about protecting themselves, and the infrastructure. So when there is a clearance from the governments, the brigades are going to be able to sail out. But but before that, MARFON also is very much involved. We learned also that our role is not only the policy holder, receiving the funds and delivering the funds. Our role is also to provide assistance to the governments and to the leading entity, and to the committees and to the responders. Also, the protocols needs to be updated. The response protocol that has all the activities that need to be implemented before, during, and after the storm was developed by the Nature Conservancy in 2018, and that's the guide that we used to work with them for the first couple of years in order to train the brigades and the responders. And that protocol has been updated now, right? Based on those learnings, there are some activities, some tasks that are not clear. So basically, it is an instrument that is going to be updated. We are in this process. And another thing is that the mechanism works. The payout distribution guidelines that we created in MARFON describes the process of how we are going to receive the funds and deliver the payout. Those guidelines are key, and that's why I insist with our partners, the Fondo Acción, with Costa Rica por Siempre, please develop your distribution, the payout distribution guidelines. That is a very key instrument to the process.
That's great. Yeah, no, thank you, Claudia. It's a really in-depth answer, just what we need. Karen, just in terms of, I know you talked a little bit about the pilot work that you've been undertaking, and I'm interested in understanding sort of maybe some of the challenges that you've encountered over the course of the last, over that period that you were undertaking those pilots, and then also just thinking about what are your ideal next steps in terms of the insurance for the Caribbean region.
Thanks, Chip. So the answer to the first one is really that there's so much more to learn and understand, and in particular, to sensitize the Caribbean region and the actors in the Caribbean in terms of the idea of the risk insurance and the risk payout. There is, in the Caribbean region, a very huge instrument, the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, so we do know of it and we are using. It is well known and used at the national level, at the big country level, for major events. So scaling it down and explaining that these types of payouts are also possible has been one of the issues of really sensitizing the range of actors that would be involved. And I think Claudia went through them well, that they really need some sense of how it would work in our region and what would happen, and how the CBF would be involved, how they would need to be involved, the citizens on the ground, how much work we would have to get done before. So I think the biggest challenge that we have is really moving that forward, and my phrase is Caribbeanizing it, making sure that it makes sense for the Caribbean.
And just before you answer your next answer, but in terms of the level at which you need to provide education and a better understanding for the people who are making the decisions, at what level are you suggesting that needs to take place?
We did very, very preliminary discussions with the government of St. Lucia as an example, and they still had so many more questions. I think we had 2 sessions of looking, and there's a lot that needs to be done. Some of the documents that are here have been developed since, and even just sharing those would be useful for that discussion and sensitization. So I do think it is at the national level, the policy level, and then with those who would understand the use and the value of it on the ground. And of course, if we're using the response teams, it also has to be those community type entities. So, and in terms of next steps, yes, the idea is to figure out, we have actually through the MARFON, Claudia spoke well, we have already done the distribution possibilities and how it would work. That was done through the project, so the design of what we want to do is well laid out. So it really is to get it now fully operational so that we can test it, and we will be doing some more work on that.
And who are you, and will you be doing so with others as well, or who are you going to? I mean, I suppose not asking you who, but it is evidently a collaborative approach.
yeah, so we will continue working with a number of the partners who are involved in this project. WTW has worked with us, and of course MARFund continues to work as the expert in the region on that work. And we are looking for and trying to figure out other partners, that key firm that would help with helping us to finance the project and the work. So we're very interested in trying to figure out what that is. And we've done a couple of proposals to move that along with groups like Aura and some of the partners, ISF. So.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Karen. That's great. Natalia. So, you know, I think your words around Providencia and the impact of Hurricane Iota was, you know, I think probably was quite touching. But I think that, you know, I'm interested to understand the mechanisms that you're exploring, perhaps to achieve financial sustainability across insurance, and what other insurance focuses do you have? Is it solely on coral reefs, or are you looking at other things as well?
Not yet in the archipelago. Of course, the next step for us is mangroves. So I'm just gonna wait for you to provide all the information, as I did with the colleagues. No, the next priority is mangroves. But we are moving on a parallel line with parametric insurance for small farmers and small enterprises inland, not in the archipelago. And we wish so that we can connect that with insurance for people in the archipelago.
And what does that look like when you talk about insurance for people? And I know that, you know, I know there's one insurer in the room. What does that look like for you? What does that mean?
Well, where we are right now, we're working with a micro insurance, and they designed the parametric insurance. It's based on rainfall. And so the technical stuff was done by, they're called micro insurance, that's their name. And they're working with distributors, large scale distributors of insurance and policies in Colombia. And we are learning in the process, but also we have established an emergency fund or a catalytic fund in order to be able to provide payouts for people that are affected below the threshold. So if the insurance is not triggered by the climatic event, but there are the small plots or the businesses are affected by drought or flooding, we can come in and provide resources even if it doesn't reach the set parameter or the threshold. That's how it's being structured inland, and we hope to learn from that experience with the catalytic fund, as well as how it's structured through local providers of insurance and distributors.
That's great. And maybe final question, just in terms of the west coast of Colombia, do you see there being opportunities of utilizing the same, maybe not on the coral reef side, but on the same kind of insurance policies that could be developed across for the coastal communities around
the Pacific coast?
Yeah.
To be honest, we haven't addressed the issue. What we're seeing is, of course, an increase of sea levels. So we don't have that many catastrophic events along the coast of Colombia on the Pacific coast. We've had in the past catastrophic events related to earthquakes, but it's not a top of mind issue for governments and people to have insurance, because it's not so common that they have catastrophic events.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Monica, so just coming back to Costa Rica, you know, I know that looking at the climate risks that you're focusing on there, what are the main findings and conclusions that of the climate risks that you're identifying in Costa Rica?
Thank you, Tim. As was mentioned before, one of our main findings is the necessity to fill that gaps of information locally. Also, we have the opportunity to go through the authorities and local NGOs and to start looking for their interest to be part of this and to keep developing a concept like this one and start preparing the local brigades. We don't still have like the insurance, but it is very useful also to start involving the people, the communities, the authorities in the area, to start looking for those other solutions and local solutions that we can give to these kind of events. So for example, as Natalia just mentioned, we found an opportunity to start thinking about to create a fund when these heat waves comes to Cahuita or to the South Caribbean, to have something to give to people who their livelihoods depends on the coral reef. So maybe we can give them something, a payout to try to at least reduce all the pressures during the heat wave event. Like, please do not go to fish or do not go with the tourism to do the snorkeling or whatever, who is giving a little more pressure during that event. So in other level, we went to the authorities in the case in Costa Rica, we have a very centralized country, so we went to San Jose where everything happened. So we had the chance to give those different ideas to the insurance companies and the institutional, people who is in charge of create all the criteria or to the ability to create the conditions to develop something like this. And at least in Costa Rica, we also have some experiences, but for agriculture. So it's nothing. It's something that is not totally new for the companies. But when we start saying or mentioning products for the corals or something in the sea, it's like, what are you talking about? Okay. So we also found an opportunity to keep working with the companies and the authorities in terms of give them the information, the other experience in the region who can guide the way to develop a product like this one in Costa Rica.
And very briefly, just in terms of, you were talking about those local companies, does that include local insurers? Or are you focusing on, or does some of this all have to come back to the international insurance market? I'm interested to see whether the local insurers have an understanding or indeed an interest in helping to develop and underwrite some of that risk.
They show very interest, and that's when we really find an opportunity, and we don't want to, in this case, we want going the next steps on develop the product, but at least we can keep working with the companies through those other opportunities that they can develop in the country. So definitely the interest is there. We just need to fill those information gaps that are needed for them to understand, and finally to start looking for the opportunities to sell or to offer that kind of products. Yeah.
That's great, really interesting, thank you. Okay, Luciana, so you left us on a bit of a cliff edge before. We need to know the end of the story, please.
There is no ending.
Oh, come on. Okay, tell us a little bit more about that, and then we'll go into the question.
Sorry for Natalia, but there's no ending. So we were designing this project, $25 million from GCF. We had all these studies, creativity. So we decided, and also inspired by Marathon, to see it not only as a product, not to think in a landscape, in a portfolio of different activities, different products, different interventions for conservation, restoration, and managing the risk. So as I mentioned, 70% were protected areas. So we were, okay, let's support the National Protected Areas Commission with annual plans, but we do the best. So great, let's do it. And then what to do with all the other connectivity areas? Let's launch call for proposals for conservation, restoration, and productive activities, many of them related to mangroves. Okay, great. And now, what do we do with all these carbon cowboys that are coming and are starting these projects, blue carbon projects? Okay, this is great. Let's focus the insurance to link it to these voluntary carbon market projects to de-risk the carbon market, the voluntary carbon market projects. So we were really focused on that. This is amazing because also our insurance, it's focused, the damage model is focused on the biomass. So it's completely focused on, okay, developers, if you lose, it's not only that you're gonna lose resources, you're gonna lose part of the carbon, so it makes sense. So we decided to do then some analysis on how legal were these blue carbon projects from the voluntary carbon market. And they were feasible economically, they were feasible in this de-risking scheme that I mentioned, but legally they were not feasible. In the current Mexican framework, in the Mexican law, the blue carbon projects are very complicated to comply with the legislations right now. We're not gonna have that problem, so maybe you're gonna be first. So we saw that it was impossible to support projects that were not completely, or to work with projects that were not completely legal under the Mexican law. So for that reason, we decided to take a step back and to rethink, okay, so maybe what it makes sense, it's not to focus on the biomass, maybe what it makes sense, it doesn't mean, and it's similar to what Monica was saying, that this doesn't work, but it means maybe what we want to protect is not biomass, no, but livelihoods linked to the mangroves or a different model, but right now that's not the way. So what we decided is to take a step back, and we're gonna rethink two options right now. One is to wait until there is more clarity on the voluntary carbon market regulations, and the other one is to rethink this insurance to other benefits, maybe livelihoods, maybe other ecosystem services provided by mangroves. No, so that's the no ending.
That's okay. Well, I'll add to your no ending. So when I worked with AXA, and it's maybe.
She was here.
She was here, yeah.
She's here.
Nice to meet you. So when I was working with AXA, I did a little work around mangrove insurance and understanding sort of the potential for it. We also did some work around the development of resilience credits. So understanding the resilience value or the risk reduction value that those mangroves provide. And we know, 75% or whatever it is of risk reduction. And that for us is a key piece of the puzzle, that if you can determine the value that they provide in risk reduction, whether it be for flooding or for the impact of assets that sit behind those ecosystems, then actually there is a potential to develop a credit. Now that has just been agreed, from what I understand, by Vera. It's taken 3 years. But I think we're now on the path to being able to utilise that not only for mangroves but also for wetland ecosystem as well. So I think that if there is a next step, then I'm very happy to have other conversation. We can put you in touch with people that may be able to put you.
And just as a disclaimer, the AXA climate insurance that is in the voluntary carbon market in Mexico, it's with a great project. That one is very legal, but it's a unique case, very, very specific case that it's very difficult to be replicated. Now we have to talk about that.
So are there other ways in which those parametric insurance can protect those livelihoods? I mean, I know that we talked a little bit there about it, but do you see that they're being able to be driven into small-scale fisheries, for instance?
Well, we are we're working right now with small-scale fisheries parametric insurance, also with WTW, and that damage model is focused on livelihoods of fishermen, and mainly focused on days that they cannot go to fish, when more than 3 days they cannot go out because of maybe loss of visibility, high waves. Those are the parameters that we observed were the most important. In that one, we are by far more advanced. We already went to the field to check if that made sense. So we are expecting to pilot that insurance in a couple of years, also in the Yucatan Peninsula, also as part of this GCF project.
And can I ask how many people or how many communities you're working with?
Right now, there are like 1,600 fishermen that we have been working with them with other projects before. So that's what it's thinking. It's around 20 cooperatives.
Yeah. So I think just in terms of this, I was just trying to sort of eke out a little bit about the importance of, or the way in which parametric insurance can be used. So it's not just obviously for reef resilience, but also for livelihoods and other elements as well. And of course, we sort of seeing this in agriculture, etc. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the audience and see whether there anybody would like to ask any questions from the audience to our panel, or to anybody for that matter. So let's go. And if you could just introduce yourself, great.
Thank you. I'm Mariana Espino. I'm the business developer at Access Climate, covering from Mexico to Argentina. And that's a great opportunity to meet you all, because I think we have just one point of view. We have the highest part of the iceberg known as Access Climate. We don't know all the work that was behind every alliance, every small thing that you have done to make it possible. And I had a panel yesterday with Graciela. We were saying that the reason why it happened was the alliance, because the only way that the insurance is able to do something is once the community and the NGOs or all the partners are really involved. That I'm saying also that in the name of Alexandra and Ulrika that were here before. And I have just many comments, but the first one is that the only way to tackle the setup, the transparency, and the social and cultural context is through the partnership. The second one is that regulation in Colombia is moving the market. So we are the first country that is completely clear on parametric solutions. And it's great to know that we're working in this region already, including agriculture, heat waves, whatever you are doing. It's a great market to do it. I'm based in Colombia. And the last question is how can we do more? Because we would love to have many more around, not only in Latin America. But do you think is maybe the insurance sector that is not doing enough, or funding, or what else can we do?
Can I jump in? I would say the first thing is, especially for Colombia, I don't know the other countries as well, we need to get people to trust insurance. Colombians don't like insurance. They don't believe in how they work. And maybe it has to do with the fact that it's set up in a way that it's probably not exactly appropriate for most people. So there's a twofold answer. We have to work with people, and when we operate this catalytic fund, that's the purpose of it. Getting people to realize that they need some kind of insurance and that it actually works after an event. But then maybe work with us, the institutions that are in close contact with the final users, if you're talking about small enterprises or fishing associations, etc. So we can help you connect with their real needs and possibilities, because they're our everyday partner. So that's my take on that question.
Anybody else like to answer, Claudia?
Sorry, it's your question about funding, right?
If it is funding or more resources, what do we need?
Okay. Yes, I probably would say that in the case of the marine insurance program, for example, we have been paying the premium with contribution from our donors. We have been raising funds for several years and also working on a sustainability strategy. So I think one of the probably barriers, I don't know if it's a barrier, right, or limitation is that there is the need of funding to pay for the premium every year. And we need to look for that resources, right, somehow. And of course, it would be great if the governments could support this payment, this premium, because the coral reefs are natural assets that belongs to the countries, right?
However, we understand that some countries, some governments may not have this type of funding, or probably the administrative procedures, or there is not a specific account in their budgets, national budgets, to pay for this type of insurance. Maybe they do have, or in the case of Guatemala, for example, other countries in the Mesoamerican Reef, they have been able to purchase insurance, parametric insurance for floodings, for droughts, for earthquakes, but for a reef, or to cover mangroves or something like that. I mean, we had to work with the governments a lot to raise this awareness in them, right? To make them, to socialize this instrument, this innovative mechanism. So yes, in terms of funding, there is the need for every year premium, and also we need to work on a sustainability strategy for that. Okay, but plus, I mean, Marfan has already started working on a sustainability strategy for the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Anybody else? Oh, there's some questions. Good, this is exciting. Okay, good.
Hi, fantastic session. Thank you very much. Really interesting insights. James Spurgeon, I'm a coastal environmental economist specialising, do a lot of work on coral reef economics. We're working for the Asian Development Bank at the moment, looking at 4 coral reef parametric insurance potential projects out in Indonesia, Philippines, Solomon Islands, and Fiji. So I'm involved in doing the coral valuation to feed into the cost-benefit analysis to form a justification for parametric insurance, but also to use the valuation to understand who the beneficiaries are to feed into potential financing mechanisms as well. So I just wondered, well, I have so many questions, but I'll limit it to one, maybe 2. One is, you touched upon it a little bit, but environmental valuation is a really powerful tool to help understand and generate a business case and identify stakeholders and sources of finance. So I wondered, to what extent have you all really looked at using that and applying it in its fullest extent? But also bleaching, so we're also looking at bleaching impacts and storm runoff impacts as well to be covered. Bleaching is a massive concern, obviously. Just be interested to hear a little bit more about to what extent bleaching has affected some of the work, the restoration work that you've actually been doing, and yeah, there's such a need for more insurance covering bleaching. You touched upon it a little bit, but any other thoughts on that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Hi. Just to respond about the bleaching, definitely it's been a big number, right? And globally, but also in the region. In the Mesoamerican Reef, one of the things that we're doing now is supporting a mapping to evaluate the impact of last year's bleaching and see what reefs are resistant, to sort of like guide where you are going to be doing, hopefully, a stronger protection and restoration. So that's one of the things that we're doing in the region towards that, right? So we know it's a fact, it's happening, so how do you actually do the best possible restoration or protection after bleaching? That's one of the things, and I agree, we still, with Monica, we have to look into a mechanism. Maybe parametric insurance is not the right one for bleaching, but some sort of financial mechanism to respond to that. And I got in the middle of the panel.
Yeah, maybe what we found is in terms of bleaching, I mean, there's many people working in the Pacific and Caribbean of Costa Rica, not many, but some people working on the coral gardening. And sometimes after the bleaching events, they go into the water and see which corals were resistant to that event. So they are trying to focus on those individuals that are more resistant and taking a piece, taking it to the lab and start reproducing those who were resistant to have some of the ones who can go to garden in the lab and in the shallow waters and try to restore based on those who are already a better genetic base or something like that. So I think we definitely need much more funds to keep support those who are looking for those solutions, but those takes more time, and that's maybe the most important thing. And time is what we don't have at this point, but we really need to keep supporting that kind of research in the field.
One or two questions, and then just keep short.
Thank you, just to add on this idea, I read about a scientist that is growing corals on shore and exposing them to heat waves, like stress testing them so that they develop that resilience before going and planting them. My question is, for insurers, I'm pretty sure the risk is well modeled and priced into the product. What we see in indemnity insurance is that some assets cannot be insured anymore because those hurricanes, those tropical storms are more and more recurring. So my question is, what is the risk of the increase of the occurrence of these storms on the product? Are they going to become unaffordable because that risk is priced into the product? And do you see already like funding those policies is a challenge?
Yeah, I would say, as I was just saying, the climate risk and the climate change impact, it takes decades to, increase the policies, right? Decrease the pricing of the policies. So that's what we need to create all these resilience programs to kind of stop the effect of it. If we don't do anything, yes, the prices will be increasing due to the increase of pricing, the increase of frequency and severity of events, right? That's why we are building all these programs to try to decrease those effects. But it can definitely get affected. That's something that we all need to work on to kind of stop the acceleration of the climate change impact. There's nothing else.
Hi, my name is Paige Rupert, and actually I have a good quick follow-up question from Amal's point, which is fantastic. Also I have 1,000 questions, but I'll keep it to this one. So have you thought about, and I understand in some places this will work and others not, have you thought about, so maybe outside parametric insurance, ways that, the type of work that you're doing, the environmental assessment, the risk mitigation, how that could maybe be applied to engage more private sector participation? So I'm thinking, who's the next MAR fund? Is there a way in the Caribbean, for example, you could get hotels along a coastline to create an SPV and almost incorporate some of the mechanisms and work you've done into their existing property insurance, right? How can you maybe embed this type of thinking so that the natural capital side of it is included, but the premium is maybe paid out by organizations that would otherwise put money towards conservation, but maybe can put money towards this specific type of mechanism. So very broad question, and maybe blue sky and maybe not what you've discussed, but what role do you think private sector, whether it's tourism, whether it's other type of funds out there, how can they engage and maybe be leveraged going forward with the lessons you've learned?
I mentioned our partnership with Avianca. So that's our airline, or it was. And they have a big interest in San Andres remaining as a tourist attraction. I don't have an answer yet, but as you know, with the private sector, you have to show them the dollars, right? So if it means they can assess the value in the long term, I see an opportunity to have them contribute actively. They're not landowners, but they depend on the coral reefs. I don't have the answer, but that's the way we're going now.
Thank you for that. And yes, that is important, that because the users of the reef, like the tourism sector, for example, could support this and contribute somehow, that would be great. Right now, in the Mesoamerican Reef, for example, we have included some of the private sector, the tourism, mostly tourist operators are part of the response teams. That is kind of their contribution right now in terms of in kind, their time, their support, their assistance. Mostly the ones that are that have these divers diving shops, something like that. Yes, diving shops. They are part of the response network, the response teams. This is kind of the advance that we have had in terms of they are participating directly. And yes, Maria, sorry. Yes, they are also co-managers of the reef areas. And so that, do you want? Oh yes, of course. I'm so sorry. Yes, I am forgetting this. In the Mesoamerican Reef, the WCS, the Wildlife Conservation Society, has contributed for the premium this year for the 2 sites. That is a very important contribution.
Thank you. Obviously, us as CTFs, we all the time try to work with the private sector in different ways, no? And obviously it will make sense, as we have been trying with payment for ecosystem services, that the people that is getting the benefit also absorb part of the cost. But also, these are providing public goods. It's not bad that the public pays for it. Like, I'm an economist, I'm not against market, but all the pressure to force us that the private sector needs to pay, it's a public good. It's not bad that the government or multilaterals pay for it. It's not necessary. It would be great that the premium is paid by the private sector, but not necessarily. Like, I think we are a little bit too narrow to think that only private sector should pay for it.
But maybe if we can, as CTFs, put together a financial tool where you have separate accounts and different contributions. Then you can pull resources together. Public money, private money, that's what we do every day.
Very good. Okay, thank you for those questions. Really interesting. And I'm going to wrap it up now because we've got only a couple of minutes left. But rich conversation. Thank you so much to everybody who's contributed. So obviously our panel, to ICRI for hosting us as well. I think it's, there are evidently lots of lessons learned. I think I'd like to have asked a question actually where we'd like to be in 2030, but I'm conscious that that time is somewhat against us, probably physically and in lots of different ways. But I think that what we're seeing here, just the fact that there are 6 different organisations sitting in front of us, all having pretty much a similar focus in driving finance and indeed insurance to develop or to really provide resilience for coastal communities, increase resilience for coastal communities, which we know will be impacted more and more by the impacts of climate change. I tip my hat to all of you for the work that you're doing, and thank you very much indeed. So thank you all very much for...
We have a photo. Very good. Thank you.
Chip, a photo, but your Chip can go in the middle. But he has to show his socks house first.
Right, where are we going? Should we start?
Anywhere, my turn.
You're done.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I take a picture with you?
So one of the
You're supposed to be in a photo. You're supposed to be in a photo.
No, you're the
Okay.
This way.
Why can't go? The phone of the mothers.
don't need help with
That goes. Where's that go?
Just somewhere. Yeah.
Does it go on there? I think so. Oh, Steve's back. Cool. Okay, interesting session. Interesting session. So we're in leadership positions. Assume that all the people can't ask questions.
Porque la teníamos que era pusimos cosas temporadas
So you're now live, everybody can hear.
Do you want me to be here? Okay, we understand.
They want to be here, kind of balance, Ah, parce que non, on prend le pupitre.
Je pense que c'est moi qui vais prendre le pupitre pour animer, etc.
D'accord, ok. Ah bah alors non, ok, ça va. Bah...
Okay, I think we can begin the session if it's okay for everyone too. So, hello everyone, I'm really happy to be here with you and I'm really happy to be at this specific pavilion with you. My name is Lucie and I'm in charge of biodiversity and adaptation topics at the Sustainable Finance Institute. The Sustainable Finance Institute is an NGO based in France. We try to gather both private institutions, including banks, insurance, asset managers and owners, but also public authorities and NGOs in order to gather private financial flows to sustainable development goals, including Paris agreements, but also Kunming-Montreal agreements. The idea of this specific session will be on corals and will be to wonder how mobilizing more private fundings for corals, restoration and preservation. I'm going to introduce our speaker of the day and then I will give you quick insight and let the floor to our speaker. So today we are really happy to be with the speakers. So thank you very much for being here with us today. Camille Maclay, you're the Group Biodiversity Specialist for BNP Paribas. Nick Silvers, you're the Director of Calum Consulting Limited, and you're here to represent ORA. Florent Merle, you're the European and International Relations Deputy Director at l'Office Français de la Biodiversité. And Stéphane Gauthier, you're the Business Development Leader for AXA Climate. So a quick introduction of what will be at stake. We are going to wonder how we can close the funding gap for coral reefs preservation and how to facilitate both innovative and private and public finance solutions to preserve and restore corals. So quick introduction about coral reefs. You all know that coral reefs are well known to preserve sea floors that also contribute to the preservation of marine biodiversity, but they are really also important for economy. Indeed, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, 1 billion people worldwide benefit from the economic service provided by corals. So different solutions will be presented by our speakers. Before that, I'm going to address my first question to Florent Merle. Florent, you're here to represent l'Office Français de la Biodiversité. L'Office Français de la Biodiversité is a specific institution based in France, and it's a public institution co-headed by the Environmental Ministry and the Agriculture Ministry. The aim of l'Office Français de la Biodiversité is to preserve biodiversity in France. Then could you please introduce our action at OFB and also what solution has the Office Français de la Biodiversité put in place to preserve corals in France?
Hello everyone. Hello, it's a bit. So hello everyone, and I'm Florent Merle. Thank you very much, Lucie, for the introduction. Thank you very much for letting the French Biodiversity Agency speak about these very important topics, corals. So coming back to OFB. We are running by the supervision of two ministries, the Ministry for Ecological Transition, as you mentioned, and Ministry also for Agriculture, and we have 5 main missions on France and mainland and its overseas territories. It's really to engage and to implement a national strategy for biodiversity, also to conserve and to protect areas. I will talk later about that. Really to do and to ensure the law enforcement on the ground, because 2/3 of our staff, it means 2,000 people are working on the ground as rangers, basically, and we mobilize society, and we also take care of all data regarding biodiversity, and we conduct some expertise and research on the field of biodiversity. I would like just to mention one example of coral conservation we have in Mayotte Island, so in Indian Ocean. So as you know, France has a lot of overseas territories, and therefore we account for 10% of the world total coral reef surface, which is significant. And in Mayotte specifically, we have 3,000 different types of corals, and we identify, as you mentioned, the importance of corals for both animals and humans, as corals are really involved in alimentation and reproduction. As we know, 25% of world known species are living in coral reef, so it's quite important, and it provides many resources for local population in terms of food, in terms of jobs, in terms of medical uses, and of course coastal protection. As you know, we face also in overseas territory impact of climate change. So how is made up the marine park in Mayotte? So we have 3 kinds of reef surrounded the island. So the barrier reef is one of the main important in the world, and we have 2 other type of reef, which are the internal reef and also the fringing reef. And it's really specific in Mayotte that this is something that we cannot find everywhere in the world, because we have only 10 examples. In Mayotte, we have a double barrier reef in the south of the island, which is really challenging to manage, because we have facing many threats on corals with urban development. As you know, Mayotte is crowded of people, and it's a really big issue to manage urban development there, but also pollutions, agriculture and monoculture, both encourages and some also cultural practices, as the use of corals to make traditional beauty masks are used by communities there. So what do we do in this park? We try to monitor health of corals. We set up a long time ago what we call the Observatory for Coral Reef, more than 30 years ago, with the main objective to assess health state of the coral reef and monitor the long-term evolution of the corals. And we monitor also the water quality within the database, and more recently the impact of climate change. We try also to be involved in sensibilization, raising the awareness with communities through actions with boats, action with local people as well. And one of the initiatives I'd like to mention is what we call the annual first bubble in the coral world, which is a day where youth can learn more about the fauna and flora of Mayotte, which include, of course, corals, and also learn about threats to biodiversity and the best action to protect it. And last point regarding Mayotte Marine Park, it's really to develop innovation with nature-based solutions, and we have been creating the first artificial coral reef in Mayotte, which is shaped with concrete domes, specifically adapted to the marine life, and where we try to grow coral cuttings. And what could be important to understand is really that we would like to monitor what could be the difference between the growth in this specific artificial coral reef, comparing to the one which are naturally growing just nearby, and we compare the both dynamic to really see over the time how we could manage coral growing. And it has also an educational function because primary school in Mayotte takes part of within this project, and with the construction of the coral cutting and the monitor of their growth, and a class in Paris, close to Paris, Bondy, is involved as well to do the same experiment in the tropical aquarium in Paris. So the children will share these experiences throughout the years and will take part in all cultural events around the result of this project. So thank you. It was just a small introduction about what we are doing at the ministry and about corals. Thanks.
Thank you very much. This precious insight gave us a global overview of what a public institution can put in place to preserve corals. So thank you for sharing this example. The objective of this roundtable is to focus on the different innovative private solutions that can be implemented. So my next question will be addressed to Camille Maclay. Camille, I wanted to mention that you are also in charge of the organization of the Finance and Biodiversity Day for COP16, and you were more broadly in charge of financial engagement on biodiversity for the CBD Secretariat. Indeed, you have a global overview of what finance sector can do on biodiversity. So my question is, how does the loss of marine biodiversity affect the economic and the financial sector? And also, could you share with us innovative financing solutions that your bank is putting in place to preserve corals and ocean biodiversity?
Thank you. Deep question. Yes, so indeed, I don't think I could lecture anyone here on, reef-related risks for financial institutions, to be frank. That's the first time someone asks the question. I think we all accept, and within BNP Paribas, we do acknowledge that nature loss creates risks to the economy, to the business, to the bank, eventually. We could think about examples of how coral loss fits into that narrative, typically impacting fisheries or coastal resilience in tropical countries. But perhaps I won't expand too much on that because that's a pretty niche question. But perhaps going back to how financial institutions can act, and I'll try to speak from the example of BNP Paribas, which is a large commercial financial institution, working both as a bank and with a large asset management business entity. BNP Paribas took a commitment in 2019, reiterated in 2021, to embed biodiversity and natural capital as a core dimension of its sustainability strategy. And that sustainability strategy is explicitly part of the group's business strategy to 2025. So there was really an intent from the bank to acknowledge the importance of biodiversity and to act within its business to protect biodiversity. Within that, of course, there is a ocean dimension that we are very keen on fostering. And The way the group looked at it is in several manners. On one hand, there was a commitment to orientate parts of the financing to activities that help protect nature. When I say financing, this means generating credit exposure or generating transactions, typically as bonds, with clients whose business helps reduce pressures on nature or generates direct positive impacts on nature. And the commitment was 4 billion euros by 2025, which in fact was already achieved by 2023, so we were still working, but effectively we've exceeded the publicly stated target as of last year. I'm sure you'll ask how we measure that, so I'll save that for later. Another avenue for biodiversity financing is more directly on impact investment. So the bank committed to allocating funds from its own capital as impact investments targeted towards businesses, innovative businesses and startups, as we like to say, whose business generates positive impact. And on that, I have a feel-good announcement to make. Fortunately, 2 weeks ago, we could announce the first transaction we made with Blue Alliance, which is an NGO supported by a limited company that works as a delegated marine protected area entity within country, and with which we made an agreement to provide a certain amount of debt that can be used to finance local community revenue diversification within coastal areas and within marine protected areas in such a way that local community activities perhaps generate less pressures on coral systems, are diversified and contribute to the marine protected area management plan. And I'll be very honest that we would love to do much more, and we are looking at doing more. There is another example that we are working on, which is, I'll say that later, but we are at the moment in the phase of exploration and research, where we are intending to and hoping to generate more financing and investment specifically towards the ocean and towards coral. I'll mention the very last one, which is the famous Indonesia Coral Bond Initiative. So some of you might have read about that. BNP Paribas is taking a structural role within that transaction. So this is supported by Jeff and the World Bank. And the relatively innovative aspect of that transaction is that BNP Paribas has managed to leverage some outcome payment funds, which is essentially philanthropic, to contribute to the outcome payment of that bond issued. So this is still with the World Bank pending approval. It's not yet publicly announced by the World Bank, but it is publicly available on the internet. And I'll perhaps save that for questions, if any, because I think it's something that, if it works, it will be quite good.
Thank you very much, Kenny. I'm now addressing my question to you, Stefan. You're here to represent AXA Climate, and we also need insurance on these topics. So could you please tell us how is AXA Climate deploying innovative and appropriate insurance solutions to preserve corals?
Thank you for the invitation. And yes, we are working on the insurance side, but before I would like to remind that AXA is widely committed to the ocean coast, working on different fronts. First of all, with the research aspect of it, we've been helping Mike Beck at the University of California in Santa Cruz to develop the Ocean Coastal Risking Index, helping to understand better the flooding. And I just mentioned this example or the thesis we are financing from AXA XL, also on ocean. Insurance will come after, first comes the understanding of the risk, first comes the research and the understanding of the behavior of these ecosystems. Understanding the behavior of these ecosystems and understanding how they will respond to climate change. That's the second part of it. How do we use and downscale the climate change scenarios we have from the IPCC at very precise, located, specific ecosystem like a coral reef or a mangrove, for example. And that's what we do. We developed a tool that enables us to understand how they will evolve in terms of risk, what will be the top risk affecting these ecosystems and the communities attached to it. So that's key. We understand this far better with figures, science, before we are able to develop any solutions. Once we have identified the main risks, and obviously we've got three in mind, I would say: earthquake, hurricane, and eventually extreme heats that may affect the behavior and the survival of these ecosystems. Then once we have identified this, we are able to say, hey, yes, in case of the occurrence of such high events, we can develop parametric solutions that will be triggered only at reading the index we are measuring, say earthquake, hurricane, path and intensity, or the extreme heat. And then we trigger immediate payouts that conserve to protect two things: repair the ecosystems as such, with the support of the entities and the NGOs that knows, and the rangers and everybody's on the ground who are able to know and restore this, because we are not the one doing this. So here the ecosystem, working as an ecosystem, is also key to make this happen. So repair the ecosystems as such, and eventually repair the losses from the community attached to these ecosystems. The beauty of parametric here is that instead of insuring a building, insuring a person, we are insuring a nature asset. For us, as long as we know what is the climate factor or catastrophe that may affect this asset, we're able to say, in this spot, given these conditions, this asset, this nature asset, we may suffer a loss, and the community attached to it. And we can pay on both ends. As an insurer, so I don't want to bore you with insurance lessons, but my first lesson as an insurer is that you will never insure the business interruption of an activity if you don't insure the activity, the building as such. That's the first lesson. With parametric insurance, you can do that, because as long as you can trigger the loss of activity out of the measurement of climate use on San Andres, we will be able soon to replicate the same thing on the San Andres reef, and we've been doing the same for extreme heat in the Philippines, also in association with Blue Alliance. So where is the difficulty? Because it sounds quite easy when you say that this way, but the difficulty is that the natural asset belongs to who? So who pays for it? That's a little bit the question, is how we gather financing. I think that there is obviously an important role of the NGOs, of the charities, governments, but the private sector needs to be involved also, and needs to measure how it benefits from this natural asset. Let's ask all the tourism industry in the Caribbean how they depend and how they factor their dependency on the Mesoamerican reef. And maybe we can increase the limit of the coverage on this one, because all of them are. I was 2 years ago in the Dominican Republic on holiday with my daughters, and I was amazed to see how much money and how many efforts they were doing on sargassos and cleaning the beaches on the algae bloom that were coming on the beaches. This is all interdependent. These businesses, these private investment needs to understand and factor how much they depend on these ecosystems and contribute to the same. So I think at one point we will need in their P&L something that to factor the nature, to make sure that we are able to finance and protect these assets, because solutions exist. We know how to do that. We are happy to develop, and we need to scale it up to make sure that we provide more resilience.
Thank you very much for this inspiring sharing. My next question is going to be addressed to you, Nick. Nick, you are the founder and chair of an NGO named Climate Bonds Initiatives. This is an NGO which mobilizes global capital for climate action. You are here to represent a foundation named ORA. The role that foundation can play on this topic is also crucial, and the coalitions of public and private players that Stefan just mentioned is also important. Could you please present your initiatives and also introduce the different tools available to both public and private players to take account oceans and coral reef issues?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me here and speaking. So I'm former chair, founder and former chair of Climate Bonds Initiative. So I retired from that, and I was dragged back to do the same for Blue Bonds. So I'm just going to talk about the Blue Bond Incubator, which is this new initiative of ORA's, which we're launching next year. Just to give you an overview of what I'll talk about. So I'll talk about bonds, blue bonds, ORA, and then how these might be applied. Is this going to work better? Yes. How these might be applied to coral, right? So ORA is a membership organisation which aims to scale up. One of its aims is to scale up investment into the sustainable blue economy. And the Blue Bonds Incubator, Blue Bonds are one of the pillars of how we're going to go about that. There are other necessary initiatives. Why Blue Bonds? So we've estimated the needs of investment into the sustainable blue economy about $500 billion a year. And we've estimated that there could be, if we grew the blue bond market to the same extent as the green bond market, that could provide investment of about 50 to 100 billion a year. So that, for the impact on the oceans, that would be massive, because the impact of the investment going into the oceans is minuscule, right? So, but compared to the bond market, 50 to 100 billion isn't very big. So the green bond market is $1 trillion a year. So that's like 5 to 10% of the green bond market. So that seems an achievable target. And also on the other side, as my colleague Camille noted from his own organisation, there's a general desire amongst investors to invest in nature solutions, and there's also regulatory drive to look at nature risk and have a sceptical eye about this. It is a genuine, but I think it's not controversial to say that there's more ambition than it's very difficult for large investors to invest in nature. So there's a lack of investable projects rather than the will amongst investors. We can talk a bit more about my slightly controversial views on this in our questions. Then I'm going along to what are bonds, and before we go on to blue bonds, because there's a lot of misunderstanding, I think, about bonds. So bonds just simply are a large entity like government or a large corporation basically borrows money, but it's either borrow money from a bank, it borrows money from the financial market. So the French government issues a bond for 500 million euros and agrees, it sells it into the market and agrees to pay back 15 million, that's not the right number, 25 million euros every year to whoever buys the bond, right? So, now notice from this that these amounts of money in bonds are very big. The smallest bond is $100 million. And also the bond market likes big issuers who are going to multiply, so who are going to, over a long period of time, issue lots of bonds, otherwise it's not worth their time to get out of bed to look at the bonds. So you need to, for a bond investment to be suitable, you need something which can, absorb $100 million or more of investment. And you think something like a coral reef, or first of all, one coral reef, what are you going to invest in? So there has to be a scale to justify it. Unlike, say, renewable energy, where offshore wind farms, for example, are big and require a big amount of investment, and then they generate electricity, which is natural for paying back a bond. Then the other thing is the majority of issuers of bonds, the people who borrow the money, are governments. That's by far the biggest sector. The second largest, corporate. But it has to be a very large corporate who has the balance sheet to be able to borrow $100 billion or more. Right, so this kind of implies we're going down a slightly, so if we think about coral reefs, the kind of natural issuer or borrower would be a government, because they're only the governments are big enough to borrow enough money, and also essentially, although coral reefs have a lot of benefit for private sector actors like tourism, something, they're essentially a public good. So and what's happened in the world in general, again back to my controversial views, is we tend to invest in things which are investable for the private sector, and this means things like nature, which are very hard to provide an income stream, and therefore very hard for the private sector to invest in. My colleagues have mentioned some examples, but generally it's very hard for a coral reef to generate a stream of income. It's more natural for the government to be the borrower, because they do provide an economic return for all of the businesses. They provide coastal protection, right? And in the past, this was a natural thing. A government would issue a bond and use the money to pay for a public asset, right? But where's the private sector come in here? The private sector is the investor, right? Okay, so we've got green bonds, so we've got blue bonds. There are about 50 issuances at the moment, but it's very small, and the point of the but compared to the green bond market, it's very small, but there is the potential. We need to scale up the investment into blue bonds. How am I doing for time? Okay, can I go? Right, so we need to scale up, and unfortunately, as I said before, the problem is they're not natural investments for investment markets. So left to the market by itself, the blue bond market probably wouldn't grow, and this is why we need a new institution like the Blue Bond Incubator. There are other people working on this, like doing great work, like TNFC, the Nature, no, TNC. So I've got so many acronyms. So because there are problems with blue bonds. So one is the lack of income stream, like a coral reef, for example, is a very good example. But also, unlike say renewable energy, which the richer countries, big economies who have got big balance sheets, who could borrow lots of money. Most of the activity in climate change mitigation is in these big economies. Most of the potential for investment in ocean is in very small economies, like small island states, who don't borrow from the bond market. So to get these projects, which are quite diverse and quite small scale, turn them into a way that could be investable by bond markets requires a lot of heavy lifting and work, because you need to work with countries which one, probably got low capacity, probably too small to access the bond market, and you need quite a lot of effort will be made to aggregating projects so you can get large enough vehicles, and there are existing methods to doing this, so that you can get them and have be issued, when you go to the bond market, be issued by someone with a balance sheet to be able to pay the bills. And that's essentially what the Blue Bond Incubator is going to do. But plus, because blue investment's very niche, there isn't much knowledge within the investment market or with investors. So there also needs to be investor education on benefits of blue. Fits in with what a lot of investors are trying to do anyway with investing into nature-based solutions, and the blue economy is super good for that, because you get an enormous bang for your buck, because it's been so massively underinvested in, and there's so much potential. And also, rolling back now to coral reefs, a lot of the problem with nature-based solutions is to show some kind of return, economic return, whereas coral reefs actually are fantastic because they act as coastal protection, and they obviously promote the local environment, and they are an asset of a country. And what we gain, another problem with modern capitalism, is we assess a country's debt, like how much it owes, but we don't assess its assets, and so we generally underestimate our assets, which are relied on for the economy. Again, I can go into more detail in questions. And finally, Camille actually mentioned this already, there has already been an Indonesian coral bond, which, just to drill into some detail, what that does is it's what's called a KPI bond, or there are other names for this. So Indonesia had some of its debt refinanced, and it agreed to, the debt is based on, it has to be based on the performance of a certain region of marine protection areas, where if it meets some criteria, it can pay a lower coupon. It's cheaper for it to, and that's one example of what could be used. And as I said, that there are extreme difficulties of turning coral into a kind of investable opportunity. Not the least of which is, do you really need a very large amount of money to be invested in coral? Because it's not like for a hard sea barrier where you've got to build the thing. The coral is really there, so it's more about you needing money to monitor it, and then can't remember the words. A lot of coral needs, because it's needs investments to keep it cooler, and that's one thing. And so we have there are potential difficulties, but bonds are potentially a good investment if done in the right way.
Thank you very much. Do you want me to share quick words about OHA, or is it okay?
Yeah, sure. Actually, Constance, would you like to talk about because she's more embedded in.
So Aura is a multi-stakeholder alliance, so we bring together different actors across the private sector, academia, NGOs, public sector, to all sort of work towards this goal of driving investment into the oceans. So we support financial innovations such as reef insurance, development of blue carbon, obviously the blue bond, incubator, impact financing for SIDS, and really focused on using those financial innovations to drive finance into the oceans.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. No, thank you very much. I think it was really also important to share this example to show that both private and public actors can be gathered on the same coalition. So we understand from our exchanges that bonds can be a good solution, but also insurance is also crucial for this issue, to bring more finance on oceans and to bring more finance on corals. I think I'm going to ask a last question to our speakers. So maybe it will be to open questions. So my question will be, what advice would you give to private financial structure to speed up funding for the oceans, and corals in particular?
Well, that's a tough one.
My question's not.
As long as the businesses, the governments, the communities will be able to recognize the value of the assets that depend on, as you said, we measure the debt and we don't measure the assets. When I'm a hotel chain, I've got X hotels on front beach hotels, depending on the sea, on the ocean, on the coral. Where do I factor this? Will I factor this just a day? I will have to clean up the beach, depending on not just along the supply chain as a pure supply chain, productivist supply chain, I would say, but also include and factor nature. I'm a generation, we've been told that we should make sure that our employees are happy in the business, our shareholders are happy, and most of our clients are happy. Yeah. This is business. No, we are just missing a fourth pillar on the table, which is the nature must be happy, because if we are not factoring this, we are not building resilient businesses, and we are going to bankruptcy at planet and business and community level. So we need to factor these nature elements in each and every business, government, community to make sure this is sustainable.
Do you want to add something on the private side?
Yes, maybe just regarding the public side, just maybe to take advantage of the managers and LPAs to work with them. They are already on the ground. They are doing a lot of things regarding development of knowledge. They are on site with local communities. They are doing they raise awareness. They enforce the law. They combat poaching and everything. So yes, my advice would be to work with public managers, public or private managers, to invest on them. Thanks.
But there's sort of both from a micro scale to a macro scale now. So there are lots of interesting innovations for things like microfinance combined with education, combined with microinsurance, where often people who lack of access to very small scale of finance, like small business, like small fisheries, they have to do things with short-term returns because to feed themselves or to keep their business going, whereas if they had access to finance, they could make longer-term decisions. And this actually ties mainly over to, if you can do things with activities which are more conserving, but they, you need to not be so worried about your short-term returns. And so that combined with education packages and often to get to work you need a trusted intermediary like a cooperative of often quite a good partner. So that's on the small scale. On the big scale, I really feel that for coral, because it is a public good, doesn't mean you need to exclude the private sector, you need the private sector involved, but they often need public-private partnerships, PPPs, and there's a lot, as long as, so the public sector, says we're going to conserve the coral reef, but then it needs the private sector help and things like, innovation in monitoring, and there's lots of experiments now in regeneration of coral, or using coral which is can survive in warmer water, and also there's lots of stuff going on with even the Great Barrier Reef about trying to cool down the seas. And so there's obvious, and there are lots of nature-based solutions like about how to make de-acidify the oceans using it. So it's but it needs the public sector and the private sector to work, because the private sector is good at working efficiently with do innovation, and this could be high-tech, but very low-tech, and local fishermen, and but it needs the right incentives, and it needs to have payment mechanisms which it can then invest in and get a return. So it's be careful about who does what between the private and public sectors.
Thank you. I think I'll build on that, Nick. Is there any development finance institution in the room? Because I don't want to be called a whinger from the private sector. But we need public and private collaboration. Essentially, this is really, and I think Nick, you underlined the small absorption capacity of coral reef financing in general. I underlined the fact that for an institution like ourselves, there is not a very concrete and broad narrative on the commercial and business interest of financing reefs. Let's be frank on that. So we are really talking about financing a public good, and this requires a combination of pension, or concessional capital, or philanthropic capital, and private investment. So if I look at the transactions that Centro has been involved in recently, I mentioned the Group Alliance program, which is a target envelope of 35 million euros with a 6 million euros grant facility from UNDP and CEVP. And this is specifically to support local community capacity building, so that the local community becomes investable, if you like, so that debt can be proposed, ventilated into the local community. If I look at the Indonesia Coral Bond initiative, we're talking about, the question is what you find outcome payment, who pays for the difference of interest that rewards the country for the achievement of its targets, but does not penalize investors. So we need outcome payment for this one.